I'll go ahead and start with introductions. My name is James C. Noscazy, and most people tend to call me Chris. I am the chairperson of this task force, and I'm going to pass it off.
It's John Tegg. I'm task force treasurer.
I'm Sarah Goldstein. I'm task force member.
Corey Fraser, task force member.
Schmaler, task force member.
Leah Northrop, task force member, member at large.
Good afternoon, this is Rich McGann. I'm also a member of the task force. Thanks for having me here.
This is Chris. That looks like it's everyone. Did everyone introduce themselves? Did we miss anyone?
No, I think Paul O'Hanlon is supposed to be joining us.
Okay. Is Corey, did Corey join us as well?
I'm here.
Great. Hello. And Georgia, okay. I see Georgia, you're here.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, this is Paul O'Hanlon. Happy to join.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we've covered all the introductions. If there was anyone we missed, speak up. It appears that we have 26 participants here. Okay. Should I go ahead and collect names of the participants? Who are our participants today?
Hey, Chris, our participants typically don't have speaking and camera privileges, but we can promote everyone to panelist. I think it might get a little bit slow and wonky though on the administration end. It's up to you. Do you want me to promote everyone in the meeting to panelist?
No, but I did want to hear the names of the individuals.
Okay, I can read that. I can read that off for you if that's helpful.
Can I ask a question, Chris? If everybody introduces themselves, can they say who they're with?
Danielle, if we promote everyone to panelist, is that going to work on your end or is that going to get clunky?
Harder for me to keep track of the speakers if we promote everyone to panelists, but it's not impossible. But just so everyone knows that the performance of the webinar may slow down. You might notice some problems with audio or video the more participants there are. But I'll be happy to promote everyone now.
Can I request that we don't do that and people just read the names of the attendees in the participants panel of the webinar?
That makes sense, Corey. I'll go ahead and read the participants.
This is Chris. I prefer that way as well. Just go ahead and read the names of the participants so we know who they are.
Okay, sounds good. So we've got Erin Steinfeld, we've got Healy Dwyer, we've got Julie Stoops, Maggie Lizzie, Ted Sweeney, who I believe should have been, I'm promoting you to panelist right now, Ted. Tina Calabro, Tobias Rather, we've got Wendy Urbanik and Wes Speary. Those are all of our attendees. And if any of them, particularly want to speak, we can always move them over to panelists. But I do want to say we have a pretty full agenda, so we might want to think about getting started.
This is Chris. Okay. Back to me. I now can see that we have opened the meeting, and I'm looking at our agenda. Has anyone had a chance to read the minutes from December of 2021? Any questions, approvals? Are there things that need to be edited?
I move we approve the minutes.
I second.
Rich McGann also said I
Good.
second.
Okay. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. I'm now going to transition to the supervisory I'm sorry, the treasurer's report from John.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. I didn't send out an official report there, but I'll go over what the balance is in our account. I haven't received our bill for the month of January. So our overall balance, and we started with a balance of $12,900, and our balance right now is $8,273. So I anticipate our January expense on interpreting services will be around $500. So just to give you a heads up on that. But I will be sending out a financial report. Joe Wasserman is not on the call, I don't think, but Chris,
I believe Joe is here.
I wanted to make sure that Joe had gotten it along with Rich McGann, because I think there were some issues last time, Rich. So I wanted to make sure you got them from the last time. You remember? Because they were sent out again. That's why I asked you that question.
Rich said, yeah, I did get that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So are there any questions on the treasurer's report?
This is Chris. I have a question. You had said the beginning balance was 12,000 and then the ending balance was 8,000.
Well, the beginning balance is 12. What we began with $12,900. That was money allotted by the county, and our balance, what we have is $8,273. And we've gone through 6 months of the task force so far.
Okay. So that means the $4,000 has covered us for the past 6 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, $4,627 is what we've spent.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification, John. Okay. Any other questions for John before I close the treasurer's report?
I have a question. I didn't see where to raise my hand, but anyway, what? I thought we didn't meet in January, so why are there interpreter expenses?
Well, you know, I'm sorry. I guess I had forgotten that we didn't meet in January. Sorry.
All right.
So, my mistake. I think you should fire me.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, the treasurer's report is closed. That aside, we're moving on to the employment committee update. Does anyone want to comment on that? I don't see Michelle Walker. I don't believe that she's on the call. And as I understand it, she is the chairperson for that committee, that group.
Yeah, you had appointed her, Chris, as chair of the employment committee.
Yeah, that's correct. I did. Does anyone want to speak in her stead or in lieu of her?
Is there potential that Michelle thought today was a holiday and she didn't have to be here?
I think she's self-employed. So maybe she gave her the day off.
This is Chris. I don't know. I can't speak to that. Okay. Since she's not present, let's go ahead and plan to maybe move that update for next month. Moving down the agenda, I can see that we need to vote on the addition or the immediate passing of the chair or past chair rather to a position. To do that, we would need to amend the bylaws to make the past chairperson part of the executive committee. So
just for clarification, Chris, we approved it last time, but Corey had requested some wording on it. So I sent wording out on it. So what we're doing is approving the wording that does alter the bylaws, just to be clarify that.
Okay, this is Chris. Or it sounds like the vote happened last month then, is that correct?
Yeah, it happened last month, but I think just to clarify, we changed the guidelines. In those guidelines, Corey had requested that I send out wording on it, which I did. So what we're doing is just approving the wording on that, so it'll go forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. I move that we accept that then.
I seconded. Joe Wasserman is here. I seconded.
Okay, and then Chris says, if you have a chance to read that, have all of you agreed on reading that and read that and accept the changes that were written in there? Do you all accept that?
Yes, accepted.
Yes.
Yes.
I abstain.
Okay, great. Chris says great.
Congratulations, Paul.
So then we have support and the motion carries. Yes, congratulations, Paul. Great. So next on the agenda, we have the spin, the follow-up visit here with Shannon Delaney. So hi, Shannon. Hello. And I guess that you can take the floor now.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for giving me and the rest of the Move PGH team so much time today with you. We really appreciate it. I am going to share my screen for a deck that we put together to help guide our conversation, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So this is our, the first slide is the title slide, and it reads, Move PGH and City County Task Force on Disabilities. The picture is of a spin hub, of a mobility hub. in downtown Pittsburgh, and it has a digital screen with the Move PGH logo on it, as well as scooters that are parked in parking bays. On the second slide is the agenda, and we are going to go through 4 different things today. First, we're going to introduce you to the Move PGH team. Then we will give you an overview of scooter operations in Pittsburgh since we launched in July of 2021. Then we will go over our vision for bringing seated vehicle options to Pittsburgh. And then we will open up the floor to discussion. I know there might be some questions along the way, so if you would like to write them down in the chat to keep track of them, we can talk about them at the end. Or Chris, if you would rather us to have the questions in the middle, we're happy to take them as we go along, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, we can go through and read it. It doesn't matter to me which you prefer. What does anyone prefer? It's fine either way with me, really.
Well, this is Paul. I'm most interested in hearing about number 3, what's next, seated vehicle options, because I'm deeply concerned that Move PGH is a city-sponsored service, and it doesn't look like it's accessible to people with disabilities. And so I'm really upset, number 1, that we have an inaccessible system that was unveiled after the ADA, and number 2, when does this become an accessible system, and why should it be legal until it's accessible?
I think that's
Chris also has something. Chris says it also seems to me a little confusing, the wording, like a seated vehicle. That sounds like maybe a golf cart. So I'm not sure. Is that what we're talking about?
So both good questions. In terms of Paul's point about the legality of the system without an accessible vehicle option, I think that the micromobility industry as a whole has been grappling with how to make our services as accessible to as many people as possible. But the goal really, and both Caroline from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure and Tosh from Innovate PGH can talk more about the philosophy behind Move PGH. But the goal really was to provide a range of different services so that different services can serve different people and different needs and different trip types. So that's the real philosophy behind not just introducing scooters as a standalone, because we know that that cannot serve everyone at all points, but trying to think about a range of different options that allow people to get out of their cars. So that's kind of the philosophy.
But given that philosophy, so what it looks to me like is that there's a problem that was identified, the last mile transit gap, and that who's being served by scooters are the people with the least problem with that last mile transit gap. So people with disabilities, people with mobility impairments, people who are overweight, there's a whole variety of people who aren't served by scooters, who are served I mean, like, what's the age demographics of who uses scooters?
Right. And I think
Well, I mean that's the question. What's the age demographics?
I think the most people who tend to use our scooters are in the 18 to 40 range.
And I mean, that's okay, but I mean, what's the demographics? How many users do you have over 50, over 60, over 70?
That I saw that you went off mute. Did you want to jump in here?
I want to echo that these are excellent questions, and Move PGH had a chance to run their own survey independent of us. You know, several of us here are representing SPIN as one of the private sector members of Move PGH, which is a broader program of the city of Pittsburgh and of Innovate PGH, the nonprofit sponsor. Luckily, they're both represented as well. We have some of that data from the survey that they presented. Paul, we're happy to discuss at the top here, and I just wanted to offer that there is quite a bit of content in the slides. If you're interested in walking through that first, just offering that as a possible direction for the discussion here. We'd be happy to address all these questions as well as pull up some of the information that's relevant that may not be in the slides.
I mean, I'm just trying, I don't know what's in your slides, so I'm trying to ascertain whether viewing your slides actually answers our questions. I mean,
The demographic information is not in these slides, but while we present them, we can pull them up. Tosh and I can work together on that as he's got that data. So we can make sure to get you to a specific answer for the age demographic question based on the survey results. We'd be happy to do that. But there's a bunch of content in the slides relative to the question about the seated vehicle option, as well as how the service is managed on the streets. And of course, we want to hear from our colleagues at the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, as well as from Innovate PGH on the broader questions about how the modes are meant to work together and how they plug into the broader transportation system to meet a variety of needs, as well as how this functions as a pilot program and where it might grow in the future to address some of the broader things it might be able to accomplish.
What about the timetable? Is the timetable spelled out clearly?
For the pilot?
No, for making this an accessible system.
The next steps towards introducing vehicles that would serve for SPIN as one member of the broader coalition that we're going to talk about timeframe there on agenda item 3.
And now,
This is Rich. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for being here, and I'm just curious. Are we following what other cities are doing, what they're planning for this in terms of accessibility, or is this just a Pittsburgh problem?
I would say that most cities are grappling with how to introduce a variety of non-car options to their cities. Pittsburgh is unique in that they have taken a multimodal approach from the beginning instead of focusing on all of these services as individual options. They have decided to try to do a collective approach. So that does make Pittsburgh unique. I think that all cities struggle with how to make their transit systems and their transportation options in general more accessible. And that's everything from making, having sidewalk repair and having sidewalks be in good repair, all the way up to paratransit services and having those on-demand services for people who need them the most. So I think everyone struggles with how to make transportation accessible. I think Pittsburgh has taken the lead in trying to make it a more holistic approach from the beginning.
The introduction here of e-scooters in Pittsburgh is unique compared to other cities, and we'd be happy to provide some of that context. I wonder if for the benefit of all, if we could move forward and do our introductions, bring in the members who are not just part of the e-scooter private provider side, as Shannon and I are, and take it from the top. And we're very, very happy to get into all of these issues. They are the critical issues, and we want to explore them fully. So I think the deck might add a little bit of context if that's okay.
This is Chris. Yes, if we can move to the slides now, that would be best.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay.
Well, I think we need to, I'm trying to figure out who's who. So yeah, maybe this would be good. So we're about to basically be introduced to who's in the room, so to speak.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So this is the third slide in the presentation. The title of the slide is Meet the Move PGH Team. There are 5 pictures on the slide, and they introduce each of the 5 participants that will be speaking with you today. I am now going to turn it over to each of those individuals to introduce themselves and describe themselves. So Caroline, would you like to go first?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Seifert. I am a policy analyst with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure in the city of Pittsburgh. In the picture on your screen, I'm a white person with short dark hair, wearing a leather jacket, sitting on the Andy Warhol Bridge with the Pittsburgh skyline behind me. Currently, I'm sitting in the office in a black face mask and red shirt with a white wall behind me. And I will toss it over to Tosh Chambers.
Thanks, Caroline. This is Tosh Chambers speaking. I am the Senior Program Director for Move PGH under the nonprofit Innovate PGH. I formerly worked with the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure to stand up this project. The picture on the screen is of me of a white cis man with short dark hair wearing a tie and blazer. I'm tuning in from my friendship home with slightly longer hair and a blue shirt as well. And thank you for having us today. Bump to Ted.
Good afternoon. My name is Ted Sweeney, and I work for SPIN as Director of Government Solutions. On the slide, I'm a white cis male with a beard and long brown hair and glasses. In real life right now on the screen, I am I'm behind or in front of a blurry background with a colored shirt. And I've been working with Tosh and others and alongside Shannon and SPIN's operations team, as well as other private sector mobility operators to put this project together and get the pilot launched since SPIN was selected by the city of Pittsburgh to offer the micromobility portion of the project.
And back to me again. My name is Shannon Delaney. I am the head of community partnerships for SPIN. I'm a white cis woman. On the screen, I'm wearing a collared shirt and a blazer with my arms crossed. In real life, I'm in my office in Brooklyn, New York, and I have a yellow background with frames on the wall. And finally, to end the introductions, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Shatner. I am a white cis male. I am the operations manager for SPIN here in Pittsburgh. On the slide, I am wearing glasses with blonde hair and a gray sweater. And coincidentally, I have that same sweater on today and the same glasses, and I'm in a white office in Cranberry Township.
All right, thanks everyone. So now we are going to the fourth slide. Oh, it looks like Chris has a question.
This is Chris. I want to thank you all 5 of you, for introducing yourselves and really giving us a description of you. It really helps for the blind and deafblind people who are in the meeting who, don't know. Are you black? Are you white? Are you tall? Are you short? What color is your hair? So that is a very clear description of you. And I really thank you for your description of your person. So thank you so much for that. I've not really seen that happen often. And I really think that that is great for our deafblind people like Rich McGann, who is here. And I just want to thank you so much for that. So back to you.
Thank you so much for that recognition. And we've actually been really impressed with the different meetings that we've attended in Pittsburgh and holding us to that higher standard of those visual descriptions. So it's definitely been a learning process. So thank you for the recognition. So turning back to the slides, the fourth slide is entitled Scooters in Pittsburgh. And the people who will be talking about these slides are Caroline and I believe Tosh. So I will kick it over to Caroline to describe this slide.
Thanks, Shannon. So the title of this slide is Scooters in Pittsburgh. There's a picture on the top right of the slide of a person of color plugging in a scooter into one of our hubs. There are 3 columns on the slide. The first one is titled One Scooter Provider. There are 3 bullet points under that. The first bullet point is selected as part of a competitive process. The second bullet point is more control for DOMI. The third bullet point is accountable and committed partner. The second column is titled Parking Policies. There are also 3 bullet points under this. The first bullet point is no parking on sidewalks. The second bullet point is riders directed to park it in the street spots, but ADA spots are prohibited. The third bullet point is 150 required parking locations installed, fully funded by SPIN. And the third column has one bullet point under it, reading enhanced enforcement against individual riders for incorrect parking. So talk about this a little bit further. We first want to talk about our current scooter operations in Pittsburgh and how we got here. So Spin was selected as part of a competitive process. We believe that this allows for our control for DOMI with regulations about parking, where scooters are being deployed, and so on. And we do truly believe that we have an accountable and committed partner in Spin. We have weekly meetings with the team to discuss operations and potential next steps, like these possible new seated options that we're going to be discussing later today. We understand that this is a pilot. We're always looking for ways to improve our process, and that's part of one of the benefits of having our weekly meetings.
I have a question. I have a question because so in effect, Spin was granted a monopoly, and I'm aware
I
of.
can't find the interpreter. Just a moment.
There is a spotlight on the interpreter. She should be in the top corner of your screen. I can pin her up there too. It's Amber.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask my question? So,
interpreter.
Hold on one moment. We're making sure that Chris can see the interpreter. Maybe unspotlighting us would help and he can control the pin himself.
You can still control the pins on your own, but we want to make sure that the interpreters are still pinned to the screen for people who might be watching on YouTube who need the ASL services. So on YouTube, the interpreter is showing up.
Awesome. Thank you, Hillary.
Sure.
And Chris is saying, I got it finally.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So anyway, I'm trying to understand this relationship with Spin. So I understand public utilities that are granted monopolies in certain areas and the logic behind that. What other monopoly like this has the city entered into? Because I'm just trying to understand how this fits into the broad scheme of things.
Caroline, if you'd like, I can take this question.
Okay, that works. Thanks, Tosh.
Sure. Well, I can certainly, this is Tosh speaking, but I can certainly speak to some of the reasons that DOMI felt was important to just go with one scooter provider for.
No, that wasn't my question. My question is, what other examples are there of monopolies like this, other than public utilities, that the city enters into?
I'm not quite sure if I can speak to that on a non-transportation level, because that's mostly my focus, but I can say that we do have a bike share that is the only bike share operating in Pittsburgh. We also have a moped share that is the only service of its type as well.
Are other scooters, other than Spin e-scooters, legal on Pittsburgh streets?
Actually, due to how the legislation was passed with our state legislatures, it is only the Spin scooters that are
because
street legal.
That's the difference with the bike program. Anybody can ride their own bike. It's not a monopoly. This is a monopoly, right? This is different.
And I should say there are many folks who do have their own personal e-scooters who do operate them throughout the city. But that
illegally, right?
That's correct, and somewhat of a technicality. But I should say, that isn't actively enforced by our police department in enforcing that state code as it is.
Are the police enforcing the helmet requirement?
So there is not a requirement to have a helmet to ride scooters.
Okay.
I think it is a fair question to understand the structure here, because there is a difference compared to how other cities have introduced e-scooters. The e-scooter industry is new. It's about 3 or 4 years old at this point. And you've seen most major North American cities introduce this technology with different kinds of sets of rules. One thing that's been very common is for the city to
some cities are outlawing them. So, I mean, I'm not interested in a company spin, so to speak, but I mean, some cities have outlawed them. And I'm just trying to understand the Pittsburgh element. In other words, the city government, the Title II under the ADA element. And I'm trying to understand how, where this monopoly fits in to solving this last mile problem. And I'm struggling to understand why it is that this monopoly was one of the first things that we entered into, because it doesn't seem to really address the problem for the people who really need it.
This is Rich. If I could add, I just want to say first, I understand that there's a problem with the scooters, and I think what we need to be focusing on is what we can do about people who use wheelchairs and or people who are sick who need to use this wheelchair. Is there a potential motorized scooter that we could implement in the way, like how grocery stores have, to have these motorized scooters that maybe that would solve this last mile problem that we're seeing here, this gap that we're seeing in the services?
This is Chris. Hold on a minute. Please hold all of your questions and allow the presenters to finish their report. Let's hold all of the questions and allow them to finish the report first. Back to our presenters.
Thanks, Chris. Caroline, were you finished up with the first column? Did you want Tosh to take the second column?
I believe Ted was going to take the second column, but yes.
Yeah, and I think it is related to the line of questioning, which I do really appreciate, because it's correct to point out that there are differences between the introduction of e-scooters in Pittsburgh versus other places. A lot of cities set relatively simple sets of rules and then let companies apply for permits and select multiple companies and then hold them accountable to meeting those expectations. What we see in general is that what Pittsburgh's been able to do is set up rules for their single provider spin that are more extensive and different from particularly the parking rules that other cities have set for their e-scooter systems. So in Pittsburgh, parking of e-scooters on sidewalks is not allowed. In almost every other North American city, it is allowed, but it's supposed to be done next to the curb. That's difficult to enforce. So one benefit that we have, and it's an ongoing enforcement process, but we are able to enforce no parking on sidewalks. And importantly, to make that work, you have to provide a place to park. And the city of Pittsburgh was able to do that with a network of parking corrals, where in dense commercial areas throughout the city of Pittsburgh, in over 150 locations, SPIN paid for the installation of parking corrals, and the SPIN app requires that riders, if they're in that general zone, so within a zone that has parking corrals, it requires them to use those parking corrals before they can end their trip. That's something that the app can't do alone. We have a local team that you're going to hear from in a moment here, but that is unique. There is no city in North America that has that network of required e-scooter parking locations. That's a unique thing that Pittsburgh's model was able to produce. In the model that other cities use, where multiple providers are there, no one provider would be able to step forward and pay for that infrastructure. And so I think that's one of the unique things about the model. Parking in ADA parking spaces is prohibited, but in places where the corrals don't exist, scooter riders are able to park in parking spots on the street. So again, that's unique and distinct from how e-scooter parking happens in other places. And it's something we were able to do together because of the single provider model for the e-scooter element of the broader Move PGH project, multi-mobility initiative. And I think I'll pass it off to Caroline for the last column, which starts what's next.
Hi, sorry, I think my audio cut out for a second. So our last column is about what's next, enhanced enforcement for individual riders for incorrect parking. So I'm just reading the chat for a moment. So what we're looking to do is we're currently working with the team over at Tosh, Innovate, and the SPIN team to develop an enhanced policy for how SPIN can go about enforcing incorrect parking. This would include parking on sidewalks as well as blocking any loading zones, ADA spots, things like that. And this could potentially include something like warnings in the app for users who are found to be continually parking incorrectly or possible suspensions of their account, these sorts of things. And it is already, I believe, in SPIN's permit that if they are aware of a scooter that's parked incorrectly, they do have to go out and address that issue within a certain time frame. I believe we can move to the next slide.
Hi, everyone. This is Jason. We're moving on to the next slide, and I can introduce that real quick. This slide in the deck is titled Local SPIN Operations. There is a picture of a young woman of color wearing a helmet, plugging in a scooter at one of our hubs. There are 3 columns of information. The first column is titled Who's in Pittsburgh? The 3 bullets read 43 W-2 employees during peak riding season, including a full-time outreach and engagement specialist, and our starting wage is $16.75 an hour. The second column is titled Deployment Policies. The 4 bullets read Deployment Zone Requirements, Geofencing Policies, 3-hour mandatory response time, and removal during emergencies. The third column is titled Contacting SPIN. The 5 bullets read call 1-888-249-9698, call 311, in-app reporting, online contact form at movepgh.com/spin, /contact-spin, and email support@spin.pm. So to the first column here of who's in Pittsburgh, we have 43 W-2 employees during our peak riding season. These are our local operations team. They're all in-house and they're scheduled on a 24/7 basis. That means that we constantly have staff on the street that are looking for scooters that are improperly parked or tip over and correcting all of those issues in real time. We also strive to resolve any problems before the public is forced to call us about them. We use a combination of technology. We call it SPIN Mission Control. This enables us to see the location and status of all of our scooters in real time, and local eyes on the street, our employees driving around town, to make sure the share scooter program is accessible for both people who utilize the services and those who don't. And with that, I will kick it over to I believe Tosh for column 2.
Thanks, Jason. So I'll speak to the deployment policies that DOMI has put in place for SPIN in regarding how they simply put their scooters out into public space, because there are many ways that SPIN is required to do that in line with the city's policies and preference. First of all, that includes deployment zones that the city has set up that involves dividing the city into various regions, assessing the demographics within those regions, knowing and that takes actually information from Port Authority's equity index, so includes income status, age, race, ability as well, to determine what is the demand for additional shared transportation resources. So that is associated to a number of scooters that must be deployed in those zones. And DOMI does good work to ensure that SPIN is meeting those requirements on a daily basis. There are
Amber,
also...
I'm on. You can go off. I'm sorry. I saw we were doubling the interpreters. I just wanted to let her know.
No problem. Moving on, there's geofencing policies, which geofencing is a term that refers to kind of tracing out a geography.
1 second. Chris is lost. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
No worries at all. So geofencing involves kind of designating geographical areas on a digital map that we can enforce different policies. And many of those are applied throughout the city to enforce no park zones, which we can do with larger general areas. Is difficult to do with small areas like sidewalks, for example, because this depends on GPS, which can be sometimes unreliable on a larger scale. But we are able to generally devote areas as maybe no ride zones, no park zones, or slow ride zones if we'd like to enforce the speed of the scooters themselves. DOMI also requires that SPIN respond to any reports or complaints regarding scooter parking or otherwise within 3 hours. So if there are any reports of a scooter being fallen down or blocking a path, SPIN will, once receiving that report, will go out and correct that in usually less than 3 hours, often between 1 and 2 hours. And we're also able to require SPIN to remove their scooters in case of emergencies and inclement weather. We definitely utilized that this month and last month. And we can also create similar policies and use geofencing to designate areas as no-go zones for temporary events, whether they be certain public space events like parties, marathons. You get the idea. And this is just actually kind of a short taste of the many policies that DOMI can levy on SPIN, but these are all ones that we welcome feedback on specific issues that may be occurring, because we can implement these very quickly to hopefully remediate any issues that are being seen.
So we were told at the meeting in June that the response time would be 1 hour for vehicles that presented accessibility barriers. And now you're saying that it's actually 3 hours. And my question is, I doubt that's even true. So what do you have to actually prove this claim?
Jason, do you want to talk about how the team reacts to this stuff in real time and who's out there doing that?
Sure, certainly. So, as I mentioned before,
but I don't want to hear you telling me that you're doing stuff. I want to hear the data on what's the response time.
To answer your question, Paul, we're not actually able to track every instance in reporting how soon the scooter is taken off the street with the technology and tools that we have. All that we can do is kind of receive the reports from SPIN on when.
And when you say we, who are you speaking as?
Of course. So I'm speaking on behalf of DOMI, Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, which I kind of act as a liaison in my role between DOMI and SPIN.
So my assertion is that DOMI lacks the infrastructure to enforce this, and yet DOMI is licensing obstructions that end up on our sidewalk that they don't have the capacity to deal with. And so I don't see anything yet. And so I really don't want to hear the stuff that you're doing. I want to hear the data on the results. And if you're saying there's no data on the results, then I think that that's outrageous. I mean, like, what are we hearing then? Spin.
Sorry, I can clarify. We do receive reports of when SPIN does respond to these requests. I don't have the technology to confirm what timeline those are reported and whether that is truly under 3 hours. But I can share that we have reviewed the procedure with SPIN, and it is actually quite common for the response to be under 1 hour. But I'd really like to allow Jason to speak to that, since he is very familiar with this.
Yeah, this is Jason speaking. Despite not having firm data points on this, as the individual that's managing our local team in Pittsburgh, I can tell you with the utmost confidence that issues like this are our biggest priority above anything else. Anytime an issue, whether it's a parking issue or a problem with a scooter or a blocked sidewalk, is reported to us, we have people on the streets ready to go to resolve that issue as quickly as possible, to the point where we will prioritize that over other work that we are doing. And whenever we don't have active issues to resolve that are reported from members of the community, we are proactively trying to find these issues and resolve them. So while we may not have exact numbers to share today, I can tell you that this is our biggest priority here in Pittsburgh.
So we have less than 5 minutes on our agenda. My biggest concern about the scooters are the injuries. Is there anything in your presentation that addresses the injuries? Because my understanding is that CMU clocked 3 injuries per day during the summer and fall that required medical attention. And so what's the data for the city of Pittsburgh on injuries?
So we do not have anything in this particular presentation about the injury data. We did see that last week in the report that came out, and it does not match our internal records as to the injuries that we were seeing. So we can make sure to share that with you. When we were talking with Hillary about the content of this presentation, she let us know that it was really going to be about the operations and the seated vehicle options, not necessarily the injuries. So that's why we didn't focus on that during this presentation.
Can we get to the seated options then?
Sure. So I'll just finish up this third column, which is just talking about the different ways you can contact SPIN. Again, this should be shared with all of you after the fact, but we just wanted to let you know all of the different ways that you can contact both SPIN, and then also you can always contact 311, and we get those complaints directly to SPIN as well, to Jason's team on the ground. So we'll go to the next slide, which is about the seated vehicle option. Ted, do you want to kick us off here?
Hold on, it's John Tech. Before you jump into this, I just want to clarify something. The e-scooters are not permitted on sidewalks. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'll introduce this slide. I do want to say that this slide and the next slide both have responsive content to the questions that have been posed. So there's different vehicle types shown on the next 2 slides. Just want to offer that before we jump into this slide. This is slide 6. It's titled Seated Vehicle Options. This slide has a picture of an orange Spin Max 2.3 model scooter equipped with a seat that enables the local operations team to access the swappable battery compartment. The scooter is parked upright on a double kickstand. The single column of text is titled About the Seated Max 2.3. The 5 bullets read, Seated option of Spin's 2-wheeled scooter. Goal, expand who can use shared micromobility. It's newly deployed in San Francisco, and it's an on-demand rental equivalent to the rest of the fleet, and it's planned for additional US markets. So what the micromobility industry has been doing over the last few years is trying out vehicle types that can serve more people. And no one vehicle can serve everyone. No one vehicle can serve most people's range of needs. We're private sector companies that are trying to have businesses that can operate sustainably in American cities. And so we're trying things incrementally that we can find to be workable in collaboration with the cities that we serve. The city of Pittsburgh isn't paying us anything to operate our vehicles on the streets. And so the financial sustainability of the service is, of course, one that's critical to us as a private sector operator. This is a vehicle type with an added seat that incrementally expands who can use the standing e-scooter model. What's good about this model, we'll go into this a little bit on the next slide, is that in addition to adding a seated option here, it doesn't change actually anything else about the availability of the service. The thing about e-scooters that makes them available and useful for last mile transportation is that they're plentiful and they can be found reliably at the locations that SPIN and the city of Pittsburgh have laid out for this pilot project, the corrals and SPIN hubs where the scooters are parked. And so these would be just like that, no separate system, deployed on the street and available, just like the normal models that you see today that do not feature the seat. This is a new offering. This is something that is now deployed in San Francisco within the last few months, and something that we're now able to deploy elsewhere. And that can include Pittsburgh. And we're here today interested in feedback on whether this is a helpful addition, and understanding that it's not one that serves every concern that someone might have with an e-scooter system, but one that adds an incremental additional opportunity that we could bring this spring to Pittsburgh. Let's advance slide and we'll talk about some distinctions that I've touched on here. This is slide 7. It's titled Seated Vehicle Options Continued. The slide is the same picture as the last slide with the seated version of the scooter parked upright on a double kickstand. The slide subheader is rental models, which has 2 bullets options listed underneath. The first option is deployment model, and I'll talk about that one first. Under this mode, the bullets here are the scooters are deployed like any other scooter on the street. The pros include on-demand availability and an in-app rental flow. The cons are limited vehicle types. We can't have a wide proliferation of vehicles available this year deployed in that style. The second option is library model. Under this model, scooters are delivered directly to users and picked up after the trip. The pros include longer rental times and the potential for other vehicle types like 3-wheeled seated scooters. The cons are that the rentals must be planned in advance and users must go through a separate rental flow. So again, as I alluded to in the last slide, this vehicle that adds a seat and the incremental opportunity that represents, that's one that could be on the street, just like the existing scooters with all the same rules. There are other vehicle types that we can try and have tried. And this is similar to things that other operators have tried in other cities that we can offer through a library checkout model. And I want to give Shannon the chance to talk about what that looks like in practice. So we've alluded to a few of those vehicle types here today as well.
Yes, thanks, Ted. So under the library model, we could have different vehicle types like a seated 3-wheeled scooter with a basket and a place for a cane that has a higher weight limit and more closely resembles the sort of wheelchairs or motorized scooters that Richard was talking about earlier that are available at the grocery store. So we could have scooters like that. We could also, we've looked at things called the Rio, which is a wheelchair attachment, which is a motorized wheel that attaches to a manual wheelchair that allows people to gain traction over that. And then in places like Fort Collins that are interested in more recreational opportunities, we've looked at hand trikes and tandem bicycles, things that are allowing people who might have low vision or who are blind to still be able to experience micromobility alongside their families. So we are looking at a range of different options, and this library model in which someone reserves the vehicle ahead of time and our operations team delivers that vehicle to the person and then picks it up at the same spot or a different spot at the end of the day. That would be a completely different model and would not have the same sort of on-demand availability that our regular scooter or traditional scooter service has. but would provide for a range of different vehicle options that might make it more easily accessible to more people. So I just wanted to talk about those two different models.
I have a point. I'll defer to Leah.
Chris, I just changed the interpreter spotlight. You good?
I guess I just want to express two things. I know that we're not at the question or discussion part of the presentation yet.
This is Chris. Just a moment. I don't see Amber, the interpreter. I'm looking. Okay, I'm good. Go ahead.
Right. So we're not yet at the end of the information giving part of the session. And I think what would be really helpful for everybody on this call to know is that we need to have the opportunity to ask all the questions that are coming up. The information is helpful, although somewhat not applicable in many cases. And if we're not able to voice our questions fully, this is not a helpful forum. And I'm getting okay. So I just want to make sure that even though it says that we've run out of time, we need to have a set aside time to be able to speak to each other, not just be talked at. And that is all I need to say about that.
And I guess that sort of echoes what I have as almost a point of order. My concern is that I don't want I don't want to hear DOMI saying that they talked to the task force on disabilities about e-scooters on February 21st because you didn't. You didn't really give us a chance to talk. And as a presentation, I mean, all too often I find that DOMI kind of uses this as cover as if somehow we've been consulted with. And like, under no circumstances is that the case here. I mean, you know, I really seriously think that the seated option that you're presenting us is a joke. I mean, like, let's have a serious discussion about having an accessible last mile transit system or not, but this is a joke.
Yeah, I understand your frustration. I think this is a complicated problem that we're trying to have. I will say that I am available to speak as long as you would like. I don't want to hijack the meeting, but I am available to speak as long as you would like. So Hillary, I don't know how you would like to handle that.
Yeah, if people are available and you guys want to stick around, and if the task force wants to continue, you know, I don't know if the interpreters can stay, they're only scheduled for a certain amount of time, but I'm definitely willing to continue facilitating the meeting after we move through the rest of our agenda items up to the task force. I just want to make sure we're able to have our other guests speak, and then if people want to stay, if the task force wants to continue with the interpreters, if they have time, I'm more than willing to facilitate.
Oh, this is Rich, if I could add. First, I would like to say that I remember hearing that the deafblind community is going to have no idea what these scooters look like or how we can use them, and we haven't gotten any information on that either yet. I also am concerned about people with wheelchairs, the motorized wheelchairs, and how that will work. So I have pretty much the same concerns as Paul and John, and there are also things that I would like to discuss about people with wheelchairs and how we're going to make sure that they're not parking on streets or sidewalks where people with wheelchairs need accessible transportation areas.
So I just got a message from one of our interpreters. This is Hillary. One of our interpreters has another meeting to go to. So why don't we reschedule another meeting, and we can talk about whether, you know, we want this to be another recorded meeting, you know, just kind of this only agenda item. I think we're all happy to continue that discussion if that makes sense. And I can follow up with you all.
Okay, this is Chris. Let's have five remaining minutes for questions before we close. Just a short 5 minutes. to open questions. And then we can move on from there.
Okay. I know that one of Paul's questions in the chat was about enforcement data and how many scooter calls 311 has received. Tosh or Caroline, did you want to take that question?
Yes, I'd be able to take that question. So we have received a number of requests that are either funneled through 311 or go directly to SPIN. We have that complete record. And some of these requests are to relocate a scooter, and some are to repair or make some other adjustments to a scooter. To date, we've received over 2,000 requests over the 7 months that SPIN has operated within the city. I should mention that is, compared to the over 400,000 trips that have occurred in the city of Pittsburgh. So we're looking at a less than 1% rate on complaints per trip. But we accept that this is a number that we are continuing to kind of look at as an indicator of some of the success in folks parking correctly. So we figure, and we are making policies and enforcing policies to ensure that that number hopefully continues to kind of decrease, and bad actors that have been identified as parking incorrectly will be continue to be kind of penalized, so that they hopefully don't exhibit that behavior in the future. But yeah, to answer your question, over 2,000, just over 2,000 requests.
Paul, this is Hillary. I just want to interject. I'm sorry. But our next guest kind of has a pretty robust presentation. And so they've actually asked to push it back. So we can continue this conversation with SPIN if everybody's okay with that, and we can reschedule with our other guest if that sounds good to everybody. Does that work? Okay, great. So we
Chris,
no longer as pressed for time.
Thank you very much, Hillary.
Okay, so it looked like John has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Now, one of the issues that is obviously is the scooters on sidewalks. First of all, it's illegal for them to be on sidewalks. And the other thing is the speed of these scooters on sidewalks. Is there a governing on the unit on this that prevents them from going 15 miles an hour is pretty fast, and I think that's their top speed. So I wondered how we're going to address enforcement of that, because that's a major issue. We've been consumed a lot by parking and all that stuff, but there's a danger, and Paul had mentioned about injuries, and all that can do is create problems. I was almost hit a couple times by an e-scooter, and I use a power wheelchair. So I'm very much concerned about that. So I'd like to make sure that we address that.
Yes. Jason, did you want to talk about the different speed limits in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, so you are correct that the scooters largely top out at 15 miles an hour. Now, it depends slightly on where you are in town. That may be less, closer to 10 miles per hour, depending on the area.
If you have a follow-up question, John?
Well, my follow-up question is, who's going to do the enforcement of that? Because again, it's not like I see everybody using a scooter now. With the winter, it's a little bit different out there now, but in the spring and summer, it's I'm sure, and I've seen that so much. And my concern is that there's no real enforcement of that.
So two things. One is that there is an on-vehicle limit to the speed. So you're correct that there's a governor on it. And then the the issues that Jason was talking about before was the geofencing. So different areas of town can be slow ride zones or no ride zones or no park zones. And so in more crowded, densely populated areas like downtown, those will have slower speed limits to account for the fact that it is a more crowded space. But those we're constantly trying to fine tune and fine hone about where those geofences should be overlaid. So if you had a sense of this is a place that needs a slow ride zone, we would be happy for that feedback.
Our time is up. Thank you so much. We have to go ahead and close out this report. And
Chris, this is Hillary. So sorry. You might have missed it, but our other guest asked to reschedule. They have a very robust presentation and they want to make sure they have time to engage with you all. So we actually don't have, we're not pressed for time as much as we were. So it's all good if you want to continue.
They will present next month?
Yes, we will reschedule with them. If not next month, you know, I hope next month, but we'll reschedule with them.
Hillary, just closing this out, the question about enforcement. What enforcement is going to be done about people illegally on sidewalks?
So SPIN has a human customer support team that can respond to complex issues, such as if there's a situation where somebody feels a scooter passed them too close, whether we get those reports from the city or from individuals or from police or from whoever those come in through. We have a human team that can connect the time and place with the ride and issue consequences to the rider for egregious issues that can absolutely be banning from using the service in the first instance. But the same system is used for parking enforcement as well. So it's a human support team that SPIN has, and DOMI has the ability, or any city department or any individual, to pass us those incidents to utilize. And I do encourage folks to do that if you're observing those occurrences.
So
Go ahead, Paul.
How many, so obviously anytime someone is injured with a SPIN e-scooter, there's a claim that's made for injuries, whether it's for medical care or something. How many injury reports have there been? Somebody has to have that data.
Yeah, sometimes claims can take an awfully long time to come in, just to be candid. So if I were to give you a number today, it would be an undercount, but we can come back to you with a number.
When? You mean this, in this presentation, or I mean,
we'd have to have some time to get you an accurate number, and I think we could provide that within the next several weeks.
Okay.
I wanted to make one final comment to John's question. And this is Tosh speaking. So we have briefed the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police on all of the policies of scooters. So they are, able to enforce, similar to how bike policies exist. They are able to write moving violations for the cases where they witness a scooter riding on a sidewalk, for example. That requires
how many have they? How many have they?
I am sorry, I don't have that data right now, but I can also look into that as well. I would say, that requires a police officer to be present to witness that kind of behavior. So we are always
precisely. It's very unlikely that it's an effective. I mean, as a mechanism for enforcement, does SPIN have the ability to identify when someone's on a sidewalk?
That is technology that currently doesn't exist on the scooters, but is being developed, I know, in some other cases, and is being piloted.
You have no effective mechanism to actually regulate this.
What I'm saying is, once that technology has been proven out in other cities and is ready to be expanded, we are pushing SPIN.
So you don't have a mechanism to regulate that. True?
Not remotely. That's correct.
is Rich. So I think there might be a little bit, I wanted to go back to the speed of the scooters. I had a question that I wanted to ask a while back about the speed of the scooters and what the limit is on there. I'm curious, what is the average speed limit for a person walking, and can we keep it closer to a normal walking speed average? And if you get above a certain mile per hour, can we start penalizing people for that?
I think so. It's my impression that an average walking speed is closer to 4 miles an hour. And we do have trade-offs here because our service is a pay per minute service. You do have trade-offs between having the speed and then also having, the priciness of the particular trip. I would also say that we should be not necessarily comparing scooters to pedestrians, but comparing them to bicycles. And bicycles do, on average, get into the 20 to 30 mile range. So this is less than how fast bicycles would be traveling on average. This is something,
That's fast.
Yes, it is. Yes, the cyclists can get really fast, but we do want to make sure that scooters are not on the sidewalk, and so that's why Spin in general, and I think DOMI also really supports the building out of bike infrastructure. We also have a feature on our app that is called Destinations that helps people to plan their trips with bike lanes in mind, so that people can make sure that they are utilizing the on the road infrastructure instead of the sidewalks.
So I have a question, I guess, that's directed toward DOMI. So are we still in a pilot stage?
Yes, the Move PGH program is a 2-year pilot that just launched this past summer. So we're about 7 months into the pilot program.
And what are the criteria for determining whether this pilot should continue, whether it was a success or failure? What criteria has been set?
The decision's already been made to put them on the streets. If the pilot is just a testing it to see what can be improved.
Sure, but a pilot by its definition is not permanent. It's a temporary piloting thing. And so we're still in the pilot stage. And the question is, at the evaluation stage, how are you going to evaluate this? And what's the criteria?
Oh, Tosh, do you have anything to add here?
Yes, absolutely. So we have established a number of KPIs to understand just the overall success of this program. One of them being, general usage. Another being availability of additional modes in many of our neighborhoods that don't currently have a micromobility access or sufficient transit access. But there definitely is a component within our assessment regarding the public's general impression and favorability of scooters here. So that is something that as we get closer to that 2-year mark of assessment, we will be conducting numerous surveys and engagement to understand that component.
So there's nothing about safety in this evaluation?
That is certainly something that is to be evaluated as well, yes.
So is there some kind of, where would I find DOMI's evaluation principles? Or, I'm really trying to understand if I'm in a pilot, how is this going to be evaluated and what's the criteria? And has that been determined and who's determining it?
I'll say we haven't finalized all of the exact numbers for those KPIs and elements. So that's something that we can certainly make more public in the near future.
And you're with Move PGH?
That's correct, which is a DOMI directed program.
And why is it that Move PGH has no community representation?
Pardon?
That Move PGH is basically governmental entities and private corporations, but there's no public community input into this entity. Am I wrong?
So there has been a fair amount of public engagement, not only in preparation for the launch of this program, but in
engagement's different than I mean, like, there's nobody at the table that's representing the community.
Well, I can assure you that there are numerous.
Who's your disability representation?
I can't speak to that question right now, but we can certainly speak with Domi about ensuring there is more representation.
So I mean, just to answer, I mean, I'm trying to get a straight answer. At the moment, is it true that there's no community representation on Move PGH?
That's not correct. I should say.
Who is it then that is providing the community representation in Move PGH specifically?
Well, Move PGH is a part of the community coalition that Healthy Ride conducts on a quarterly basis, and that's where we take a lot of our newer updates and initiatives to.
Healthy Ride is your community representative?
They're more of just the convener that has many numerous community representatives available there. Additionally, you know, we have a lot of interface with directly with our communities as we're engaging them for aspects like mobility hubs and other more kind of community specific engagement. We've set up a lot of connections with all of the kind of community groups and grass tops throughout the city for those communities to engage us on.
Did you reach out to the Committee for Accessible Transportation? Did you reach out to Pittsburghers for Public Transit? Did you reach out to the AC Allegheny County Transit Council? I mean, there are players. I mean, who?
I can say that Pittsburghers for Public Transit has been engaged on this project before.
But they're not part of Move PGH.
That's correct. They didn't choose to have.
And really, I'm directing this to Domi. Like, what the hell? This is a city program with no public input. I don't understand it. You're creating a transit system based on essentially industry, and you're not involving the community. I'm aghast at this.
I can only say I don't agree with that characterization. But
well, who is it? Who is your community?
If I could interrupt, I just wanted to let you guys know that first and foremost, I think that we should be involving the deaf, blind, and the blind community as well, because I think that our guidance is important in setting up these programs so that we could train people in how to approach these problems. The problem is that people aren't being safe on the streets, and we know that. And I think first and foremost, before we get to anything else, we need to address how people are going to use the scooter safely around the deaf, blind, and the blind community. That's something that needs to be addressed.
I will say, and this is Shannon from Spin, I will say that our scooters are equipped with haptics. And so if someone who is low vision or blind has their walking stick and the walking stick hits the scooter, there is a sound that emits from that scooter to make sure that you can know that the scooter is in your path before you get there. And that's obviously if the scooter has been incorrectly parked. So that's a situation we want to avoid, but there is that backup. We also have worked as SPIN with the American Association for People with Disabilities on a national level, and then with local organizations to get their input on how to make sure that we are communicating well with our riders. For example, we have in the app reminders and messages that are from the Disabled Rights Action Coalition in Salt Lake City that reminds people that they need to be aware of their fellow residents who might be blind or low vision and be behaving in such a way that keeps their safety in mind. We would be happy, Richard, to talk with you about how to have that sort of messaging in the SPIN app in Pittsburgh. And especially if there are particular places where you or other of the blind and low vision community live, where we need to be sure to either modify our deployment or have more regular checks in those particular areas. We can also modify our operations in that way.
Shannon, this is Leah. We need it all. We need it all. We don't need to find special places where it should be. It needs to happen in all of the areas. This should not be a transportation option for some that actually takes away the mobility of others. I think that is one of the hardest things for me to understand. I understand that there are some people who will benefit from using the scooter. However, it will prevent people from moving around the city. And that is the concern. So if there are options that will make it safer for anybody with a disability, that needs to happen. Not if, but now.
Right. And I agree with you.
And fundamentally, putting it in your terms of service or whatever people sign up for whenever they actually kind of create an account to rent a scooter clearly isn't enough because it doesn't address the enforcement component. So, and until we talk about the fact that there is effectively no enforcement component, then we're really just sort of, it's all nice stories.
And Chris has a comment. Chris says, I also want to let you all know I have experience with the airport before with a golf cart in the hallway whenever you're walking down the corridor, and they have those golf carts there. So for example, it's like kind of like a sidewalk concept. But it's actually happened to me where I'm trucking along, taking my bag, and that golf cart is behind me, and I'm deaf. I don't hear them honking. And they're behind me going, honk, honk, honk. And I'm just walking, and they're laying on the horn, like, move out of the way, buddy. And they're beeping at me, and I am missing it. And people all look back at me like I'm the problem. And I'm like, oh, and then I look behind me and I say, well, there was a golf cart behind me. And then I can move to the side. That's just one example. I'm deaf. I don't know that that's behind me. Now with these scooters, how am I to know that there's a scooter behind me? I don't know. So that's just one example to give you an idea of how a deaf person is mobile through the world and is clueless about those things behind them. And someone can be beeping or yelling behind you and you're missing it. And I only knew that because the people in the airport in front of me were kind of making a spectacle and looking at this happen.
Right. And I think all of these issues are incredibly complex. One of the ways that we've tried to solve that, which is not, of course, 100% of the time, is having that headlight that is always on when the scooter is on. So that might shine that light. So there is some sort of visual cue. But again, people aren't supposed to be on the sidewalk at all. So hopefully those opportunities for when they would be actually behind you, that wouldn't be occurring in the first place. To Leah's point about wanting to have all of the options now, I'm not saying that this is an either or sort of situation. I'm saying that we do want to do all of these options. I'm just saying that if there are particular places where we know that there are there have been particular issues, we want to make sure that we're directing our attention there. Not to say that we don't want to have our attention throughout the entire city of Pittsburgh. I'm just trying to make sure that if there are particular points of concern, that we're not ignoring those and that we're making sure that we have that input from this meeting.
Right, and I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that the onus isn't being put back on the disabled community to figure out what the problem is and to solve it, because that is not a functional way of running any kind of, action. So I just want to make sure that Spin and Domi know that it is your responsibility to make this right. And if you have questions for us, we're here to clarify, but it needs to come from you, not from us.
Right. And that's definitely, I agree with you that the responsibility is on our side. I'm just trying to tell you the different.
Okay, so since you've admitted you're the responsible party, although I think it's Domi, what's the date that you're going to be releasing the accessible option for last mile transit? Because I don't see that you're trying. So what's the date?
Talking specifically about the seated vehicle that we were talking about, or are you talking about a more comprehensive issue?
I'm talking about a truly accessible option. What's the date that you will be unveiling the truly accessible option in Pittsburgh? How long will we wait? That's my question.
I'm not sure that I'm the person to be answering that, sir.
I'm sure you're not. That's why I asked Domi. Move PGH as Domi's agent. What's the date?
I can say that we currently don't have a form factor that I think fits your description of accessible, and I think that's something we would like to identify if possible, and maybe we can continue this conversation to understand what options are out there in your opinion that does fit that description, because I think that is the intent of Move PGH, is acknowledging that scooters are not the mode choice for everyone. It doesn't suit everyone's needs for every case, but the intention is to certainly, though, round out the city's offerings in mobility, identify those that can make those connections for those most vulnerable, and eventually introduce them.
You understand why I don't want to hear about intentions and why I'm asking about dates. So there's no date right now, actually, that you can even offer for when there will be an accessible option.
I'm sorry, I cannot offer a date.
Okay, so the problem I have with this whole presentation is that you came to us unprepared to address the fundamental question that you had to expect that we would have. And so what is it that this is about then? I mean, why is it that we're having a meeting and here it is an hour into the agenda that we're finding out that you didn't even come here prepared to talk about the very question that we would presumably have as our highest priority?
I definitely take that feedback. Certainly, we do want to continue our conversations with this group. And I believe, our intent to expand the folks who can access SPIN is hopefully a positive one with the seated scooter options and some of the other options outlaid today that we weren't quite pictured, I think can hopefully continue to bridge the gap and make those connections for those for folks of this group. Beyond that, I'd say we would like to continue engaging this group to understand what exactly helps to improve your situation in a first last mile connection. And we can go on to hopefully work to introduce various modes that do meet that kind of connection in Pittsburgh. But at this time, we only have these kind of incremental additions that hopefully do increase the accessibility.
So given that there's no one who's a part of Move PGH with the kind of expertise that you're saying you need, in other words, information about what exactly people with mobility impairments need to solve the last mile problem, there's nobody that's part of Move PGH that's there to provide or advocate for that. And the whole design of Move PGH and what DOMI is doing, where there's absolutely no plan. I mean, there's no plan to make an accessible system here. There's just no plan. It's all like hope. And I don't understand. I mean, there's so many fundamental things about the design, excuse me, the design of this that's not being addressed. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, this is Rich. I agree with Paul and I understand his concerns. And I would like to say that I think Paul's right in that the first thing that you need to do is acknowledge that this is a learning process and that there are improvements to be made. It's going to be trial and error, you know, and we're happy to help you figure out how to be successful. I think that in the future with collaboration, we can make this as a successful process, but it's going to take some trial and error and some feedback.
Yeah, Mark Schmaler here. Listening to this, it's an interesting discussion too. Just putting a seat on a scooter is not, I'm sure for some people that might work, but understand that these are often, clinically prescribed mobility devices. And just because something has a seat on it doesn't mean, it's not much different than standing on the device either. So I think people with disabilities can certainly provide you a lot of insights as to how they use mobility devices. And I think also experts in the area who prescribe and design these devices would be helpful. Also want to say I'm a person with low vision and I work here in Oakland, live in the East End. My concern with the scooters is, and you could say the same thing about bikes and cars too, they move very quickly. They make absolutely no noise. So Chris's problem of not hearing is a good one, but vision too. And just having a light on the front of it doesn't really matter a whole lot unless it's dark out. In a bright sunlight, you're not going to see them. And just my personal feeling walking around Oakland in my neighborhood is the people riding the scooters assume you see them and assume you will get out of their way. And it just seems to me like more like rules of the road of, driving a car should apply to scooters too, and maybe they do, but I'm not seeing a consistent behavior of scooter users, let alone just leaving them on the sidewalk for people to trip over is another issue. So I agree with a lot of what Paul is saying, and that enforcement probably needs to be looked at. Also, as a scientist, pilot studies mean something to me as well. It means a study to look at something and decide whether it's worth moving forward, modifying the approach, or abandoning the approach. So if there's any proposal that was provided that's public information, I assume it is. I think the committee would like to see that. And what are going to be the metrics at the end of the pilot? What are we planning to look at during this pilot, if that's adverse events or other maybe more positive things? I think that would be very useful for discussion with the task force.
Okay, everyone. Okay, this is Chris. We do unfortunately have to close our time. We are at time and we need to move forward. Most of all, I want to thank each of you for coming and being involved in our meeting. I really have, it's been a learning experience for you. And I think that things will be better the next time. So again, thank you. I want to move on, however. I want to look at our report for the committee meeting with Mayor Gainey, his inauguration. Who is going to speak to that?
Well, let me begin if I may. That's John Tegg. The original plan was to have a small group meeting with Mayor Gainey, and then also what I was specifically assigned to do was to work on a community forum that would be a broader reach to the disability community. So the small group meeting took place, and there were a number of task force members there, including Paul O'Hanlon and myself. I was there mainly at the end of the meeting to talk about the community forum, but I thought overall it was a good meeting, and I know Hillary was there also. So what I'd like to do, and I think I'd also like to hear from Tina Calabra, who working with her, put this small group meeting together. And maybe it would be a good thing to do is to have Tina speak, and then maybe Paul, and I know Michelle's not on the call. She was there in place of Chris. And so that maybe that would be a good way to start. So can we do it that way, Chris?
This is Chris. Yeah, I wasn't involved because I was out of the country at the time. I think John, you're the best person to speak to this. You certainly know more than I do, so go right ahead. I'm not up to date with what's going on.
Okay, so
Hillary, I'm trying to move Tina over to panelist, and as Danielle said in the beginning of the meeting, Zoom is really being slow about moving people over. So my apologies to Tina. We're trying to move her over so she can talk.
You want me to try? Let me try, Hillary. Hold on.
Well, let's try that for a second. If that doesn't work, then maybe Paul can speak to his participation, because there were a number of other folks that we tried to make the group as cross disability as possible, which we think we did a pretty good job of, but still we tried to make it so that all voices were heard, and not just the physical disability community, but others as well. So have we been able to move Tina over yet or not?
Yep, she's here.
Okay.
Hi,
All right, Tina, what I did, I basically just introduced it, and I said, well, what I'd like to do is have you talk about it, because you and I basically organized it, and then give Paul and Hillary a chance to speak on it also. So you want to start?
Tina's muted if she
Tina,
doesn't.
are you with us?
That's a possibility too.
She's been on the whole time, so she may have stepped away for something. If somebody else who was there wants to.
Well, let's do it this way then. Paul, would you like to make some comments since you were there?
I mean, truthfully, I'm not sure what I would say. I wasn't prepared. Maybe Tina's here now. I saw the.
Can you hear us? It looks like Tina's unmuted, but we can't hear you yet, Tina.
Oh, Hillary, I'm so sorry.
There you are. Hi.
I got distracted. Are you calling on me for my comment?
John, yeah, John wanted you to go over your thoughts.
Here,
About
just what I wanted to do, Tina, really was to have you speak to it, and then give Paul and Hillary a chance. Michelle Walker's not on our call, so she can't really comment. But would you like to go ahead?
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. I got distracted from the meeting. Okay, so as many of you know, I and John Tegg worked together to arrange 2 meetings with Ed Gainey's office as he is making a transition into the mayor's role. So one of those was a small group meeting with about 10 people. And the second one is the larger community forum. And so John and I worked together. We had much communication with the mayor's office about that. And the first meeting, the small group meeting, happened on February 14th. And it was attended by, like I said, 10 people at our end, presenting. 3 of them were our task force members. That's John, Paul, and Michelle. And the remainder of our group was community members, including myself and my son, Mark Steidel. So as John and I were advancing the communication about these meetings, we worked together. We always said that the small group meeting is more like an educational meeting, and it's to set up a larger community meeting to provide background on where we've been as a disability friendly city and as a ADA compliant city, and then make that the prelude to a larger community forum. So there were 2 things then. It was a good meeting. Mayor Gainey was not there, but we met with Chief of Staff Jake Wheatley and Assistant Chief of Staff Felicity Williams, and Hillary Roman was there, and Andrew Dash from City Planning as well. So coming out of that good meeting that we had, then were 2 next steps. One of them was to continue planning for that community forum, and John and Georgia Petropoulos were on it that afternoon, and they have proceeded with having those conversations about that community forum. But the other thing that came out of that meeting is that we need to integrate our, let's say, that small group, the education that we provided and the recap that we provided and the recommendations that we provided to the existing transition committees, which are established with the Gainey transition effort. So there's 4 committees. There's 3 ways with the 4 committees on 4 different topics. There's 3 ways for each committee to provide input. So one way is through a community meeting, and the first one is tonight. They meet, like over the next few weeks, pretty much once a week. The second way is through a survey that comes off of the website. And the other way is an idea board, which is more like a discussion board. So what our small group is going to do is meet this week. We're meeting on Thursday to repurpose what we brought to the Monday, February 14th meeting and distribute those points that we made into these 4 transition committee entities so that we, we have our input and it's stated, it's in writing and so forth. And so we are meeting and we're going to do that. So we have no question we'll be able to accomplish that. But another step that came out of this meeting that we had is that we have a really good working committee, both for the community forum and for this small group kind of being scribes, and writing things down and getting these things, in the proper places. So what we said is, instead of us being like sort of a freelance committee of people that just came together, let's call ourselves a working committee. And so what I would like to suggest is that, would it be possible for the task force to establish an ad hoc committee, a working committee, an ad hoc committee to provide input and communicate with the Mayor Gainey transition effort. So it would be just for these efforts that we're talking about, just providing input and then staging a community forum. And as you all know, that the community forum will be co-sponsored by the task force and Oakland for All. And so that's what I wanted to say there. And I know I'm going to have to jump off the call, but let me just put one other point in here, because I know you're going to talk about the sidewalk legislation in City Council. I just want to say very briefly that there was a lot of good publicity, a lot of good news reports about that, and they incorporated the recognition and acknowledgement of the ADA in that legislation. So what I wanted to suggest is that the task force write a letter to the editor of the Post-Gazette and express appreciation for the way that the City Council had integrated the ADA into that effort. And if you do that for the Post-Gazette, then it's something that can be shared very widely. It only has to be like 2-3 paragraphs. And if anybody needs my help with that, but I think it should come from the task force. So I'll pass over to John now.
Okay, thank you, Tina, and sorry you have to get off. Paul, would you, I'm sorry I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I thought you might have a few words about that before we go to the sidewalk thing, but do you have any comments you would like to add?
No, I think Tina did an excellent summary. I really don't have anything to add.
Okay, then Hillary, do you want to add anything since you were in the meeting?
Nope, I was really just there to facilitate, and I was happy to do it.
Okay, all right. Well, I think then, one of the suggestions that Tina was making that we form a ad hoc committee on the task force to follow through with these with the outreach to the mayor and actually help with the community forum as well. So that's my suggestion. We don't have to make a motion on it today. We can wait till the next meeting, but I wanted to basically get the because I'm going to continue my conversation with the administration on it as it is, but that was a suggestion that Tina came up with. So something to consider, and I think we would probably need to, Chris, as chair, you can appoint a committee, and you really don't need approval of the task force to do it. You can seek approval if you want, but you can create this committee on your own. So what I'd like you to do is think about what Tina had to say and go from there on it.
Chris says, okay, will do. Thank you, John.
Does anybody want to take on the task of writing the letter to the Post-Gazette?
Paul just left.
I saw him go. Paul, you're the one.
I know that Paul, I've already talked about it with Paul, and he said he would prefer for the task force to write it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but somebody's going to need to write it. Tina did volunteer to help.
All right, I'll do it if Tina helps me.
Aha.
I will do that, Leah.
Okay, great.
Did you hear that, Paul? Oh. Okay, so.
Okay, all right, good stuff, Chris says.
That's all I had.
Said that works for me.
Okay, well, we have 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left in our remaining 5 minutes. Do we have anything else to bring up? Any issues?
I mean, if it's okay, I'm going to throw something in the chat. I know I'm skipping over, I think, the sidewalk update, if that's okay, but I'm just going to put a link in the chat. Of course, Hillary, now I can't find it. Do you have it handy? I lost it.
Yeah,
so I've been, okay, Hillary will put it in the chat because she's super prepared and on top of things. And I got too caught up in the spin conversation and lost my link. So I've been working to try to find some experts that we can tap for the Eradicate Hate panel on hate crimes against disabled the disabled community. I have not been very successful. So I created this Google form. I don't want to, obviously we don't even have time to talk about it anymore, but I didn't want to open a new discussion. I really just wanted to put this link out there so that you have it. If there is somebody that you think I should contact, just you can either email me their name and hopefully an email or a phone number. If you want to be more specific, you can use this link so I can keep track of them. I see Rich. Is he waving hand?
I was gonna say, just for Rich, Joe, and anyone who might be watching this, who can't see the chat, please reach out to Leah or I to get that link. Go ahead, Rich.
He's muted.
Rich is muted. Can he start again?
He doesn't realize it.
Sorry about that. I just want to say, hey, Leah, we have a Pittsburgh program called Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. And that has a lot of information about abuse and violence. And we've had that since 2003, I believe. And the task force against abuse was set up, and also we had a presentation from a woman from Seattle who was a deaf woman who was providing support services for victims of abuse.
Okay.
And we were talking about the history of the high percentage of abuse in the deaf community, and how a lot of the time it's kind of quieted, hushed. And so I have a lot of information about that I can give you.
Okay, I appreciate it so much. Thank you very much. I'm gonna, that's all. I just wanted to make a call out for contacts. I don't want to talk about it too much. Thank you.
Okay, Chris says, all right, then the time we have 2 minutes left. And I just want to let you know that the next meeting will be March 22nd at 2 o'clock. We are still operating on Zoom, correct? And is that correct, Hillary? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so we will still be operating on Zoom on March 22nd. Thank you.
This is Rich. I'd like to make a motion to close.
Hold on a second. I wanted to, because Paul didn't get a chance to talk about the sidewalk issue in the cafes. I just want to comment. Paul did an excellent job on that and working with City Council to make the changes that needed to take place. So, Paul, what we were saying is that I think Leah, you're going to write the letter with Tina's help. Is that what was I correct on that?
Yep, you are correct.
Okay, and to send it to the a letter to the editor of the Post-Gazette, right? Is that what the agreement was? So that I just wanted to mention that since Paul's not going to have time to talk about the issue.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, my audio went out. There was this power surge here, so.
All right, I think there was a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes, so then Richard has motioned to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
And John has seconded the motion. All in support of that, say aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
Aye.
Now, anyone opposed? Okay, so I will see you all next month in March. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good day.